At the corporate party, she showed up in the dress I had given her, and she didn't expect my reaction. I've always hated these things. Corporate parties, polished, curated events with champagne that tastes like carbonated regret and conversations that float just above the surface of anything real. But I showed up anyway. I always do. Smile on my face, button-down shirt tucked just right, blazer sharp enough to convince people I care more about synergy than sanity. It was a Friday night in San Francisco, mid-October. The kind of chilly evening where the fog creeps in like a whisper. The venue was one of those rooftop lounges in the financial district. Glass railings, string lights overhead, waiters passing around sliders that probably cost more per piece than a week's worth of groceries. From up there, you could see the Bay Bridge twinkling in the distance. It should have been a night to remember. And it was. Just not for the reasons I expected. I arrived early, as usual, with a craft beer in one hand and the usual canned greetings in my back pocket. I talked with a few people from operations, nodded through a conversation about vendor audits, and kept half an eye on the entrance, waiting without admitting it to myself, for her. Emily. We've been married almost 8 years. Not perfect years, but good ones, or so I thought. She was supposed to arrive later, straight from the hotel where she and her team had been in a day-long leadership retreat. We were both in the same company, different departments, different floors, but our worlds overlapped enough for things like this to matter. At around 7:35, she arrived. She didn't walk in. She entered, like a scene change in a play. She wore that emerald green dress I gave her for our anniversary 2 years ago. I remember picking it out from a boutique in Pacific Heights. The saleswoman said it would bring out her inner power. At the time, it felt like a romantic gesture. Seeing her in it tonight felt like something else entirely. The dress clung to her in a way that turned heads. Not just mine. All around me, conversations slowed. Eyes drifted. Even the VP of Finance, who rarely looked up from his phone, gave her a once-over. She looked intentional. Hair curled and swept to one side. Diamond studs I didn't recognize. And heels taller than what she usually wore, the kind that announced themselves with every step. I expected her to scan the crowd, find me, smile. She didn't. She barely acknowledged anyone at all, really. Her eyes skimmed past mine, and for a second, I wondered if she'd missed me. But then she paused at the bar, said something to one of the interns I didn't recognize, and tossed her hair like she was posing for a photo that no one was taking. I started walking toward her. Just a few steps in, I stopped cold. At first, I couldn't place it. Something under her left ear caught the light. A small, irregular blotch. Smudged. Faint. But visible enough. Lipstick. Not hers. Emily wears this muted coral shade, always has. Says bright red makes her feel like she's trying too hard. But this was a deep crimson. Almost maroon. Bold. The kind of color that leaves a mark and doesn't apologize for it. I froze mid-step, the crowd blurring around me. Music played. Laughter echoed. Someone popped a bottle of champagne behind me. But all I could see was that mark. That single, damning clue clinging to her neck like a ghost. She turned slightly, adjusting her clutch, and just like that, the smudge vanished behind a lock of hair. But I'd seen it, and she knew it, because in that same moment, she caught me looking. Our eyes locked, just for a second. Her expression didn't change, not visibly, but I saw something flicker, recognition, maybe, or guilt. And then, like a curtain falling, she turned toward the makeshift stage as one of the executives stepped up to the microphone. Applause erupted. Emily clapped like everyone else. Like everything was normal. Like the world hadn't just tilted 2 degrees off center. I stood still, one hand in my pocket, the other gripping my beer a little too tightly. I tried to smile when someone from HR passed by and said something about the open bar, but my mind was already 1,000 miles away. The speeches began. Words floated over the crowd, growth, strategy, community, but I wasn't listening. I was watching her. Emily stood near the front, surrounded by her team, laughing at the appropriate beats, nodding when the CEO mentioned the sales department's unparalleled contribution. She even reached out and touched the arm of the man next to her. A tall guy, dark hair. I didn't recognize him at first. Probably one of the new hires. But the way they stood, it was close. Too close for a work event. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe it was just the wine, the fog, the stress. But when you've been with someone for nearly a decade, you learn their language, even the parts they don't speak out loud. And tonight, Emily was speaking volumes. Her posture, her eyes, the way she kept scanning the room but never quite landed on me. It was all off, just slightly, but enough. When the speeches ended, and the lights dimmed slightly for the DJ to take over, I made my way to the edge of the crowd. I told myself I was just getting some air, but the truth was I needed distance. I leaned on the glass railing, looking out over the city, but my mind kept replaying what I saw. That lipstick mark, that dress, that glance. It didn't add up. None of it did. Emily was always polished, sure, but tonight she felt curated, like she'd planned every inch of her appearance for someone. And if I had to be honest, it didn't feel like that someone was me. I stayed out there longer than I probably should have. A few coworkers came by, made small talk. I nodded along, laughed at the right times, but I couldn't shake the image out of my mind. Was I imagining things? Was I letting a single smudge on her neck rewrite the entire narrative of our relationship? Or was it the first crack in the wall? Later, when the party began to thin out and the music shifted from upbeat to mellow, Emily finally came over. She wrapped her arms around me, casually, like nothing was wrong, kissed my cheek and asked if I'd tried the mini crab cakes. I didn't answer. Instead, I stared at the side of her neck. The mark was gone, wiped clean. Or maybe it had never been there to begin with. Maybe my brain conjured it. Wishful thinking masquerading as paranoia. But then again, Emily always carried travel wipes in her purse. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice light rehearsed. "Yeah," I said, swallowing hard. "Just tired." She smiled, tilted her head. "You sure? You look like you've seen a ghost." I smiled back, hollow. "Something like that." She didn't press. She never did. And maybe that was part of the problem. The Uber ride home was quiet. We sat in the back seat, side by side, our shoulders barely touching. She scrolled through her phone. I watched the lights of the city pass by the window. We didn't speak. Not about the party. Not about the dress. Not about the mark I was no longer sure I had even seen. But in the pit of my stomach, something heavy settled. Something cold. It wasn't just the lipstick. It was everything else, too. Suspicion is a quiet thing at first. It doesn't scream or crash through the door. It whispers, pokes. It sits beside you in silence until it becomes part of the background noise, hard to separate from your own thoughts. I didn't realize how long it had been sitting with me until that night after the party. When I lay in bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling while Emily slept next to me, breathing slow and even, and all I could think about was that smudge on her neck. The mind is a cruel editor. It starts digging up scenes you didn't pay attention to the first time. Moments that seemed harmless until context shifts everything. Suddenly, things that used to feel normal begin to pulse with new meaning. Like the meetings. Emily had started staying late at the office more frequently, usually on Wednesdays and Fridays. Alignment sinks, she called them. She said her team had been looped into a major restructure and she was helping onboard new hires. I didn't question it at first. I'd always respected her work ethic. She was sharp, ambitious, driven. The kind of person who didn't just climb ladders but redesign them entirely. But something about how she explained those meetings began to feel off. Vague, almost too rehearsed. Sometimes she'd text me from work around 8 or 9, saying she was wrapping up soon. But the timestamps on those messages didn't match the ones in our shared calendar, which had once been a place of complete transparency between us. I used to be able to glance at it and know where she was, who she was with, what her day looked like. Now, entire blocks of her schedule were blank or marked private. First, I brushed it off, told myself she was just setting boundaries. People are allowed to keep some corners of their lives to themselves, even in marriage, right? But then came the bag. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the lipstick. Maybe it was just the quiet urgency gnawing at the back of my mind. But one night while Emily was in the shower, I walked past her purse on the kitchen stool. It was unzipped, just barely. Something about it felt like an invitation, even though I knew it wasn't. I didn't dig. I just peeked. Inside, wedged between a makeup bag and a tangle of chargers, were 2 paper receipts. One was from a bar in the Marina District, an upscale place with moody lighting and live jazz on Thursdays. We'd never been there together. The second was from a rooftop lounge in Oakland. Same story. These weren't the kind of places you visited for solo drinks after work or for casual team bonding. They were date places. I put the receipts back exactly where I found them, zipped up the bag, and walked away feeling like I'd just stolen something. Later that week, another detail slipped into my awareness. Emily's perfume. For years, she wore this light citrus scent. Something floral but subtle, clean and fresh, like bergamot with a hint of lemon. I used to joke that I could smell her coming before I saw her. But now, it was different, richer, deeper, an oriental fragrance that lingered long after she walked past me. Spicy, smoky, seductive, the kind of scent you wear when you want to be remembered. When I asked her about it, she laughed and said she just wanted to try something more grown up. She even offered her wrist so I could smell it up close. I smiled, said it was nice, but inside, it didn't feel like perfume. Felt like a performance. Then there was her phone. It used to live on the kitchen counter, plugged into the charger while we made dinner or watched Netflix. I'd see texts pop up, messages from friends, coworkers, her sister. Nothing ever hidden. But now it was always face down, locked, tucked into her purse or pocket even when she was home. The screen no longer lit up when I walked into the room. Her laugh when she read something funny now ended with her phone being turned away from me. One night, while she was in the shower again. Funny how often the truth comes out during those brief, steam-filled silences. I picked up her phone, just to look. It was locked, of course. She'd changed the code. And that alone I could have excused. People change passwords all the time. But when I tilted the screen, I saw something else. A new app. It didn't have a name, just a symbol. 2 white overlapping circles on a black background. Nothing I recognized. Later, I searched for it and found out it was an encrypted messaging platform. The kind that boasts about disappearing messages and zero data retention. The kind that doesn't want to be found. And just like that, the pieces started forming a picture. Not a complete one. Not yet. But enough to make me flinch. There were other things, 2 smaller signs that, on their own, wouldn't mean much. The way she flinched when I touched her shoulder unexpectedly. The pause before she answered, "What did you do today?" The nervous energy that trailed behind her like a shadow. Once, I asked her about a name I'd seen pop up on her laptop, Jonas. It was in a Slack thread I glimpsed over her shoulder. When I mentioned it casually, she said he was just a project consultant. One of the new guys helping out with analytics. But she said it too fast. Too smoothly. Like a line she'd memorized. After that, I started noticing how often his name came up in passing. Jonas said the campaign needs more time. Jonas found a bug in the back end. Jonas thinks we're underestimating the budget. Jonas. Always Jonas. But I'd never met him. Never heard about him before that week. And for someone new, he seemed to have settled into her vocabulary like an old friend. Still, I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I didn't want to be the jealous husband. The insecure cliché. I wanted to believe in trust. In logic. In the version of our relationship that I'd spent years building with her. But the mind is cruel, and it doesn't let go once the seed is planted. Every smile she gave me now felt rehearsed. Every "I love you" sounded filtered. Every normal moment was tinted by the possibility that behind the curtain, something else, someone else was waiting. The hardest part wasn't the possibility that she might be cheating. It was the waiting, the silence between the signs, the not knowing that started to define every second of every day. And then came the night she didn't come home. She texted around 7:30, said the meeting was running long. I told her to take her time. I waited until 9, then 10. By 11:15, I stopped pacing. At midnight, I finally gave in and called her. It rang 3 times, then went to voicemail. I tried again 15 minutes later. Same result. She walked in at 1:07 a.m. Heels in her hand, mascara slightly smudged. She said she was exhausted, that the meeting turned into dinner, that she hadn't realized how late it had gotten. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to, but I didn't ask any questions. I just nodded and went to bed. Lying there, staring at the ceiling again, I realized something had shifted. Not just in our marriage, but in me. I wasn't just suspicious anymore. I was preparing. Preparing to face a truth I wasn't ready to admit. Preparing to find proof. Preparing, slowly but surely, to leave. It was no longer about catching her in the act. It was about finally listening to the part of myself that had been screaming beneath the surface. She was slipping away from me, and I needed to know why. It happened on a Friday. I wasn't supposed to be home early. That's the part that still catches in my throat. If I hadn't skipped the last 2 meetings and ducked out of the office when no one was looking, I would have missed it. Maybe things would have dragged on longer. Maybe I would have kept swimming in that sick, half-knowing place. But fate, chance, whatever you want to call it, had other plans. It had been one of those rare, impulsive decisions. Around 2 p.m. I looked out my office window, saw the light hitting the Embarcadero in a way that reminded me of the road trips Emily and I used to take, and something inside me just folded. I closed my laptop, slid it into my bag, and walked out the door without telling anyone. I told myself I'd surprise her, pick up dinner from that Thai place she liked. Maybe, I don't know, try to feel something normal again. The drive home was quiet. I played an old playlist on shuffle, one that Emily and I used to listen to in the car. Sweet Disposition came on, and I laughed bitterly at the timing. It had been our moving in together song back in the day. Now it felt like a ghost humming in the backseat. As I pulled into our street, the first thing I noticed was the car. It wasn't hers. Wasn't anyone's I recognized either. A sleek black Audi, parked right in front of our driveway like it belonged there. Clean. Too clean. The kind of car you keep detailed weekly and drive like a status symbol. I sat there for a moment, engine idling, watching the sunlight glint off the polished hood. My hands were sweating. I turned off the ignition. The neighborhood was still. A few birds chirping. Someone mowing a lawn down the block. I got out of the car slowly, carrying the takeout bag in one hand like a prop. My heart was thudding in that way it does when you already know the truth but haven't said it out loud yet. I walked around the side of the house, toward the living room window. Curtains slightly parted. That right there should have been the clue. Emily never left the curtains that way. She liked them either wide open for the light or closed completely for privacy. Never in between. Never like this, sloppy, careless. I took one step closer and looked in. And that's when everything stopped. There she was, Emily, in our living room. She wasn't dressed for work anymore. No blazer, no pencil skirt. She was in casual clothes, jeans and a sweater she usually wore on weekends. Her feet were bare. She had her hair tied up messily, in that effortless way she knew I always loved. But she wasn't alone. There was a man with her. Tall, dark hair, strong build, a few gray strands at the temple, just enough to make him look distinguished. He stood close to her, so close their bodies almost brushed as they moved. He was laughing at something she said. And then she did it. This little smile, the one she only used when she was trying to charm someone. I hadn't seen her use it on me in months. She poured wine into 2 glasses, set one down for him. He reached out and touched her arm. She didn't flinch. She smiled wider. He moved closer, casually resting his hand on her waist as if he had done it 100 times before. And then, right there in our living room, he kissed her. Not a peck. Not some nervous, impulsive thing. A kiss that said, "We've been here before." My body reacted before my mind could catch up. I stepped back, stumbled slightly against the hedges, nearly dropped the bag of food. The shock was cold and immediate, like diving headfirst into ice water. It didn't even feel like pain at first. Felt like static, like I had been unplugged from reality. I stood there for maybe a minute, maybe more, long enough for the kiss to end, long enough to see her lean into him again. And that was it. Confirmation. I didn't rush in. Didn't storm through the front door screaming her name or demanding answers. I just walked quietly back to my car, takeout still in hand, and sat in the driver's seat staring straight ahead. Everything felt still, paralyzed. The world continued around me. Birds chirped. A neighbor waved as he walked by with his dog, completely unaware that my life had just split in two. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was where it happened. Our living room. The same couch where we had curled up with blankets during flu season. The same spot where she opened birthday gifts and I rubbed her feet after long days. Now it was theirs. I didn't go back inside that night. Couldn't. Instead, I drove across the bridge and parked near Ocean Beach. Sat there with the engine off, listening to the waves crash and the wind batter the windows. I don't even remember what I was thinking. Just a swirling haze of disbelief, rage, and a hollow ache that settled somewhere deep in my ribs. I stayed there until past midnight. No texts from her. No missed calls. I guess she assumed I was still working late, or maybe she didn't care where I was at all. That night, I slept in my car. I didn't want to go home. Couldn't. The image of that kiss replayed every time I closed my eyes. When I finally came back the next morning, she was in the kitchen, brewing coffee like nothing had happened. She smiled when she saw me and asked if I'd had a long day. Her hair was still damp from a shower. Her tone was casual, like she wasn't hiding an entire world behind her eyes. And I realized something as I stood there watching her stir cream into her mug. She wasn't going to confess. She wasn't going to crack under guilt or stumble over some poorly built lie. She had done this before, and she would do it again, because in her mind, she was still in control of the story. But that kiss had changed everything. That kiss gave me clarity. This wasn't a guess anymore. It wasn't suspicion. It was fact. I didn't need to wonder if I was being paranoid. Didn't need to comb through receipts or analyze her tone. I had seen it. There's something oddly empowering about that kind of certainty. It hurts, yes. Cuts in a place too deep for language. But it also focuses you, sharpens your intent. She had crossed a line. And now I had a choice to make. After that day, something in me hardened. It wasn't dramatic. No storming out, no screaming match, no emotional breakdown in the shower. I just shut down. Quietly, internally, like flipping a switch that dimmed everything I used to feel. That's the thing about betrayal, it doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it lands like a quiet thud in your chest, and you carry it with you into every hour, every room, every breath. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long sh*t. If I had learned anything from watching the pieces fall apart, it was this: don't act on emotion. That's what they expect. That's what gives them the advantage. No, I needed to be patient, methodical, cold if I had to be. So I started collecting. The first step was small, unobtrusive. I ordered a miniature security camera online, one of those motion-activated models the size of a thumb drive. I installed it in the garage, tucked high in the corner where the wall met the rafters. The camera covered just enough ground to catch anyone entering or leaving through the side door. I knew that door well. It was the one Emily used when she didn't want to come through the front. The one that creaked slightly if you didn't know how to lift the handle just right. She never mentioned the sound, which meant she was getting better at sneaking. That first night, nothing. Second night, same. But on the third, just after 10:30 p.m., the camera caught something. The same black Audi, headlights off, rolling to a slow, familiar stop in front of our house. The man got out, tall, same build, same confident gait. He didn't check his phone, didn't look around, just walked straight to the garage door with the ease of someone who'd done it before. And when Emily opened the door to let him in, she didn't even look surprised. No hesitation, no pause. She kissed him, casually, like she was greeting a friend. Then they disappeared inside. I watched the footage 3 times that night. I memorized the way he rested his hand on her back as she let him in, the slight smile on her face, the relaxed way her body leaned into him like she belonged there, like she didn't belong to me anymore. I downloaded the clip and saved it to a flash drive. Then I created a folder on my computer and labeled it plainly, evidence. Felt ridiculous at first, like I was building a court case against someone I still shared a bed with. But I knew I needed more. A kiss through the window, a midnight visit. Those could be spun, denied. Emily was smart. She'd find ways to twist it if I confronted her now. I had to be airtight, so I kept digging. The phone bill was next. We shared a family plan, and while Emily thought I barely glanced at the statements, I knew exactly where to look. I exported the call logs into a spreadsheet and filtered for unknown numbers. Anything not saved in her contacts. It didn't take long to find one that stood out. A 415 number. Local. Dozens of calls over the last month. Always late at night. Always brief. Sometimes just a minute, sometimes 20. The most recent one, the night before, 23 minutes long. At 11:16 p.m. Right around the time the Audi had pulled away from our driveway. I cross-referenced the number online. It wasn't listed under any name, but that didn't surprise me. There are apps now, burner lines, encrypted call services. If they were being careful, they'd use something that left no paper trail. But they'd underestimated how small their digital footprints really were. I kept track of every call, logged the timestamps, matched them against her movements. I watched her claim she was going to bed early on nights where her calls lasted until midnight. I watched her leave for brunch with the girls on a Sunday, only to have the Audi appear again on the footage less than an hour later. I started checking her laptop next. It was easy, really. She used the same password for everything. Our dog's name and her birth year. She always thought I didn't pay attention to stuff like that. But I did. I paid attention to everything now. There wasn't much in her email. She'd cleared out most of her inbox recently, and her trash folder was empty. But I found a few things. Calendar invites that didn't appear on our shared schedule. A booking confirmation for a wine tasting in Sonoma, with a reservation for 2 guests. No mention of who the second was. No trace of the email it came with. But it was there. I took *TS, saved them, labeled them, archived them. By the end of that week, I had gathered over 40 pieces of evidence. Photos, videos, call logs, receipts, calendar entries, *TS of texts that I captured when her phone lit up beside me in bed and she turned it face down without answering. All of it. Every lie, every omission, every deliberate step she took away from the truth. I even found the spare key was missing. It used to be in the hallway drawer, Emily's idea actually. In case we lock ourselves out, she had said. We'd made a deal not to give it out unless we talked about it first. But when I checked the drawer that Thursday night, it was gone. The next day, the camera caught the man using it to let himself in. I stared at the screen, watching him unlock my home with ease, like he had every right to be there. And maybe, in his mind, he did. Maybe Emily had given him more than just a key. Maybe she'd given him her version of our story, one where I was the distant husband, the cold one, the one she was simply enduring while waiting to be saved. But I had the truth, and the truth didn't need to be loud. It just needed to be real. I started sleeping in the guest room. Emily asked why once. I told her I had a lot on my mind. She didn't push. She had stopped asking real questions weeks ago. We became a silent house, a museum of habits. We still made dinner together, but it was like watching actors pantomime a marriage. I'd pass her the salt. She'd ask me to grab the basil. We'd eat while scrolling on our phones. No eye contact. No *Macy. Just a hollow routine that gave us both cover. Every night I added more to the folder. I changed the name eventually, renamed it to something vague. Projects 2024. Zip. Something she'd never open if she found it on the desktop. I backed it up to a cloud account she didn't know existed. I even emailed it to myself under a different alias. I had read enough stories, people getting caught mid-confrontation, losing everything because they hadn't backed up what they knew. I wasn't going to be that guy. I was careful, deliberate, patient. And for all the pain I felt watching her drift further away, part of me had gone numb. I think it was a kind of survival. If I let myself feel everything all at once, I would have drowned. But by focusing on the logistics, on building the case, gathering the proof, I gave myself something solid to hold on to. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing. Because sooner or later, this house of cards she built was going to collapse. And I was going to be the one to pull the final card. By the time I reached the 5th week of quiet collecting, the worst part wasn't even the evidence anymore. It was how normal everything still looked on the outside. The dishwasher still beeped when the cycle ended. The porch light still flicked on at dusk. Emily still reminded me to pick up oat milk on my way home. And she still kissed my cheek in the morning, even though we both knew the affection didn't reach either of us anymore. If someone had walked into our lives mid-scene, they might have thought we were just another tired couple going through the motions. But beneath the surface, the current was wild. I had enough proof now to sink a career, hers, maybe even his. I just hadn't decided what to do with it. Not yet. The calm I had been building was starting to fray at the edges. I needed one final piece to bring the whole picture into focus. That piece came by accident. It was a Wednesday, Emily's team dinner night. She'd left the house around 6, in a navy blue dress I hadn't seen before. When I asked where it came from, she said she'd had it for months and I just didn't notice. I noticed everything now. I waited exactly 45 minutes after she left before I opened her laptop again. Not for messages this time. I wanted to see her calendar. She'd gotten smart. Switched most of her activity to that encrypted messenger. Stopped using her usual email for anything personal. But she wasn't tech-savvy enough to remember how syncing worked. Her company calendar auto-updated from her internal work server. I pulled it up. There it was. A meeting block labeled simply Jonas 1:1. Scheduled for the exact time of her dinner. My jaw tensed. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. That name, Jonas, had kept showing up like a stain that wouldn't wash out. She mentioned him here and there in passing, usually in some innocuous work context, but I'd never met him. Never seen his face. And yet his presence had become increasingly difficult to ignore. I opened a browser and typed in her company's name, followed by executive team. There he was, Jonas M. Torres, Vice President of Business Strategy. Joined the company 3 months ago, recently relocated from Chicago. The photo on the website matched the man from the surveillance footage, the man who had walked through my garage door and kissed my wife in my living room. Of course, I don't know what shocked me more, that he worked with her or that he was someone her family knew. That discovery didn't come until later that night, when I decided to dig deeper. I started searching social media, beginning with LinkedIn. His profile was clean, curated. All buzzwords and corporate polish. But Facebook told a different story. I clicked on one of the tagged photos, an old group sh*T at a lake house. Emily was in it. So was Jonas. Younger, of course, but unmistakable. They stood side by side, smiling at the camera. Her arm rested lightly on his shoulder. Someone had commented, "The crew's all back together again, just like high school." High school. I leaned back in my chair, the pieces falling into place like magnets snapping into alignment. Jonas wasn't some random coworker. He had known her for years. Long before me. I scrolled through the post history, heart pounding. A cousin of hers had tagged him in an old family reunion post. So glad to see Jonas again after all these years. The comments told the rest of the story. He had been close to Emily's family. Close enough to be invited to events. To weddings. Holidays. Which meant this wasn't new. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't impulsive. It was something that had been waiting quietly in the wings, biding its time. And now it was here, fully formed, calculated, and far older than I'd imagined. Suddenly, every look she gave him in those videos felt heavier. The way he moved through our house like it was familiar. The key he used to let himself in. That wasn't improvisation. That was confidence. Ownership. He didn't just know Emily. He knew us. He knew where we lived. Where we kept the spare key. When I'd be gone. I clicked back into the surveillance folder and pulled up a clip from the previous week. Watched again as he opened the door without knocking. Emily already waiting in the kitchen, barefoot, wine glasses in hand. The casualness of it made me sick. And then I noticed something I hadn't before. As Jonas entered, He reached toward the wall and tapped the thermostat. Just a light adjustment, one notch down like it was too warm for him. I hadn't touched that thermostat in weeks. Emily certainly didn't. She hated being cold. But Jonas knew how to operate it. Knew where it was. Knew what temperature he liked. I felt like I was watching a version of my life where I'd already been replaced. Not just as a partner. As a presence. As the man in the house. And in that moment, something shifted again. This wasn't just infidelity. This wasn't just betrayal. This was invasion. A complete, quiet replacement of the life I thought I was still living. The decisions, the routines, the sacred mundane things we build relationships on. He was stepping into all of it with permission. With ease. With her. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stayed in the guest room, going back over everything, the footage, the texts, the receipts. I took the spare key off the wall hook and dropped it into a drawer. Then I locked it. Not that it would change anything. Not really. But it gave me 1 inch of ground back. The next morning, Emily was chipper. Too chipper. She kissed the top of my head and asked if I'd mind picking up eggs after work. I stared at her, trying to decide if she'd always been this good at pretending or if I was just getting worse at hiding my own withdrawal. Sure, I said, voice flat. She left wearing the same perfume he complimented in one of her messages, the heavier scent she never wore around me until recently. I stood in the kitchen for a while after she left, surrounded by the faint echo of her morning routine, the click of the coffee maker, the cereal bowl still in the sink, the scent of her shampoo in the air, and for the first time in a long time I didn't feel jealous. I didn't feel hurt. I felt detached. Like I was already on the other side of something. I wasn't watching a life fall apart anymore. I was watching the final scenes of a story I no longer wanted to be in. I stopped reacting. Quietly opened a new bank account. Signed a lease on a small apartment near my old campus. Gathered everything, photos, receipts, footage, into a single folder. At home, we spoke in gestures, not words. She carried on like nothing had changed. But I had. I no longer flinched. I no longer hoped. I was already gone in every way but physically. All that remained was the exit. Sunday morning, I left. A flash drive on the kitchen table held everything. Images, dates, calls. On top, one photo, Emily holding his hand at our door. I didn't wait for her reaction. Her messages came later. Confusion, rage, begging. I didn't respond. In the silence of my new place, I felt weight lift. I slept through the night for the first time in months. Betrayal was over. So was pretending. Now there was only freedom.